Glad to have you for another expert interview on Transform Catholic by Catholic Missionary Disciples. Today, I'm really excited about our guest. It's Father James Mallon. Now, currently, Father James serves as pastor of Our Lady of Guadalupe Parish in Dartmouth, Nova Scotia, but he's also the founder of Divine Renovation Ministry, which is an international apostolate which helps Catholic parishes in the renewal of the church. Father James is also the author of the best-selling book, Divine Renovation from a Maintenance to a Missional Parish, which is an engaging guide for parishes seeking to cultivate vibrant and dynamic faith communities. In 2016, Father James also authored the Divine Renovation Guidebook, a step-by-step manual for transforming a parish. He's also the author of several other books and co-author of another. The message of divine renovation has resonated in the hearts of tens of thousands of pastors and lay leaders throughout the world. It's inspired and motivated them to act and seek help in transforming their own faith community. To answer their needs, the Divine Renovation Ministry was created, and Father James continues to serve the Divine Renovation Ministry with a portion of his time. He was born in Scotland. He now, of course, lives in Canada, where he serves, and he currently resides in Halifax, Nova Scotia. In addition to his ministry, Father James loves soccer, movies, photography, dogs, everything Apple, and a good single malt scotch. One of the things I really enjoyed talking to Father James about was the role of the pastor in parish renewal, and I think you're going to enjoy it as well. Just tell us a little bit about what you're up to these days.
Yeah, so after, I think I was at St. Benedict Parish for 7-8 years, and we had begun to mentor a younger priest who had tremendous leadership capacity, and through that I was able to transfer leadership of the parish to him, working with the bishop, and Father Simon Lobo is doing a phenomenal job at St. Benedict Parish. My heart is just so full of joy. It's even stronger than it was when I was pastor. And so I went from there to work for 3 years, half-time with the diocese, half-time with Divine Renovation Ministry. And with the diocese, we worked on a whole kind of restructuring of the diocese and leadership training. And then I remember I was traveling, spending most of my time speaking with priests in different places. And I just felt that more and more my stories were about the past. Yeah. And it was like the kind of the being in the front lines of parish renewal, it began to feel distant. And so I began to feel that the urging, I got to get back in, because one of our values in our ministry is from the trenches. We're not theoreticians, we're practitioners who reflect and pray on what we've experienced and share those experiences and insights with others. And the other thing that happened was COVID. So COVID, it was right away, I knew that COVID has changed everything. And I'm coaching and working with priests, and I'm realizing I don't know what I'm talking about anymore. Like, I don't know. I don't have a clue what it means to pastor during a pandemic. Yeah. I need to get back in. And so with the restructuring of our diocese, we had needs for pastors. And so I'm back in a parish, and boy, oh boy. So let me tell you about my new parish. Yeah. I realized how much of a bubble I was in at St. Benedict, at St. Benedict Parish, after many years and hard work, it was like we were kind of like living the dream of being, leading a parish that was in the missionary zone. So I'm in a parish now that is much closer to the average experience of a parish for most priests around the world. So it's a newly amalgamated parish. It's called Our Lady of Guadalupe. Great name, patroness of the new evangelization, patroness of the Americas, all of the Americas, including Canada. Yeah. And we are an amalgamation of 5 previous parishes.
Oh, wow.
So
that's a lot.
St. Peter's, that's a lot. St. Peter's Parish, the mother church in this part of the diocese, St. Immaculate Conception Parish is about 1.5 miles away, a 100-year-old building. St. Paul's Parish, which is another 1.5 miles in the other direction. And then St. Anthony's Parish, which also has a Polish mission attached to it, the 5th one, less than 1 mile away from that church. So in Canada, we work with kilometers. So all of those locations within a 3-kilometer radius, which is, I think, about 2 miles. So within a 2-mile radius, we have 14 buildings.
Goodness gracious.
14 buildings.
Yeah.
Many of them in very poor shape, crumbling. A total pre-COVID, pre-amalgamation attendance of 750 people on a weekend. Average, 70% of the parishioners over the age of 70. Over the years, really very minimal, if if in fact none, no formation, no evangelization of adults
Mm.
or formation of disciples. Yeah, like it's like I look at it and it's like every single struggle or challenge I face in all the different parishes over the years, they're all compressed into one.
Yeah.
And throw on top of that COVID. And so I'm sufficiently and in a healthy way, terrified and excited. Because that's
Yeah.
the thing. It's like, and it's in one sense, it's great to be back, but it's and I'm really thrilled in one sense. Like it's in one sense, as much as I struggle, I love it because I'm at the coal face. I'm experiencing the pain of it, and parish renewal begins with pain, and it happens through pain. Like leading parish renewal is painful, is
Yeah.
difficult, is tough, and it's good to be reminded of that reality. So lots of challenges. We've got the way I see it, we've got about a 4 or 5 year window to turn the trajectory because if you look at all of our demographics, all of our statistics, the things you would measure traditionally, sacramental data, our story is going like this.
Mm-hmm.
And COVID just kicked it off the cliff. And so if we don't begin to turn this in the next 4 or 5 years, the whole future of the church in this part of the city is up for grabs. Now, we're much more secularized in Canada than you are in the United States. But whenever I talk to folks from the US, I like to say, hey, I'm from your future.
Yeah, absolutely.
Unless you guys are somehow show yourself to be immune to the secularization that is sweeping across the world, the tsunami of relativism, et cetera, et cetera. But I don't think you are. Here's one thing, Marcel, I'll say this, like sometimes when I've traveled and spoken in the US, people say, well, that's in Canada. It's not like that here. And it's like, well, I just looked at your statistics and yes, it's true. Your decline is not as steep as ours. It's still a decline. Right. If it's a decline, it's just a matter of time before we all end up in the same place. Yeah. And the point is, if we keep doing what we're doing, we're going to keep getting what we're getting. Yeah. Anyway.
No, that's beautiful. And Father, you're repeating everything I say. So now we get to build off each other and kind of bounce these things back off. And I consider myself a bit of a Catholic futurist, if you will. I try to forecast out what's going to happen. And for 15 years, I've been telling people we're coming to a place where things are going to be worse. And I worked on college campuses for a long time. And in a sense, the college campus is the forerunner of all culture that we're going to have within 10 years or so. Same thing in Western Europe for the United States. As Canada to the United States, you guys are just progressing a little bit faster. And one of the things I've found is that I get a lot of Catholic leaders, especially in places where there is growth in the United States, that will trumpet it. They'll put it out because they're trying to fundraise or they're doing the bishop's appeal or whatever. And they say, well, look, we had to add a parish and we had 1,500 people who were confirmed this year or whatnot. Well, if you look at data, it's still declined, especially regarding the fact that our population is going up.
That's right.
Yeah. So we kind of like in Texas, we live in this huge bubble of the population of Texas is doing this. And at best, Catholicism's doing this, which is a slow decline, but only because it's buffered up by this. So how do you speak to folks who are saying that?
Well, I think any measurement, if you're speaking, and I think there's nothing wrong with measuring. People say, well, you shouldn't count people. We say, well, we count people because people count. You can't measure what you can't manage what you can't measure. You can't be intentional about it. And all the things that bring health in life, they only happen when we exercise intentionality, because when we just go with the flow, it flows in a direction we don't like. And so we need to be intentional. This is to be humanly intentional about something is not violating any spiritual principles, because our theological anthropology says grace builds on nature. Mm-hmm. And so we bring our best efforts. Jesus said, you give them something to feed. We've got to bring our best. And he comes and does the miracles, because it's got to be based on miracles. So we need to be intentional about doing the things that make the difference. But forgot what you asked me about. No. Oh yeah, proportional. So the thing is, any measurement, it's got to be proportional. I remember years ago, I was speaking in France and we were flying home on Sunday morning, and I did mass in a chapel, and it was standing room only. People standing out the door, all 4 of us.
Mhm.
because it was a tiny little room. I did mass, and so we can say, "Oh, our churches are packed." That
Yeah.
doesn't mean anything. That church was packed that morning. There was only 4 people. What are your measurements? What are you comparing it to? Are you comparing it to the current population trends? What percentage of Catholics are coming to church? Get this. I remember years ago talking to this priest who he was in a parish that had 5,000 people on a weekend, and we were talking about discipleship programs and how to evaluate them. And he was saying that in his parish, he had about 300 adults involved in adult discipleship. And he was quite pleased because 300 adults gathered together is pretty impressive.
Mm-hmm.
But when you evaluate it proportionally, it's actually not very good.
Yeah.
So sometimes large parishes, the lack of health can be disguised.
Yeah.
You don't notice the lack of health because it looks good. Similar thing. I remember doing a parish mission years and years ago in a parish in a rural area, and the priest was apologizing to me for what he thought was a disappointing turnout of parishioners. But compared to Sunday Mass attendance, 50% of his parishioners came to this mission. I said to him, don't be discouraged. This is the best turnout I've ever had at any parish mission.
That's
in
amazing.
Small parishes, the presence of health can be disguised.
Yeah.
Proportionality, as in all things, even in our financial giving to the Lord, the measurement has value in proportion. And I think we need to keep that in mind.
Good. I love the principle of proportionality. And a comment and then a question. The comment is, when I worked in campus ministry, we were widely considered the world's best at Texas A&M. And we would have international visitors, just like you guys have had. And, they'd come and they'd say, well, how do we recreate this? And I'd say, well, first of all, we're terrible at campus ministry. And they'd say, what are you talking about? You're the biggest, you're the most renowned, you've got this huge staff, you're getting all this fruit. And I'd say, okay, but percentage wise, at best, we get maybe a third of self-identified Catholics who will show up at some point during the semester to Mass regularly, about a quarter of the kids who identify as Catholic. That means that we're not even hitting the majority of kids who call themselves Catholics with the gospel message, and much less the ones who aren't Catholic. My comment was, I think proportionality here matters to that, because we're serving 60, 70,000 college students. Now, my question is then, if that's the case, and a lot of pastors are probably, they're thinking, Father James has hit me right where I'm hurting. I feel what Father James is talking about. What is the duty of a priest who already feels burdened by having 5 parishes in an amalgamation into one, or a staff budget that's decreasing, and I'm managing this decline? What do I do, Father? I don't have the time or the effort or the skill.
Well, this is, do we have 14 hours to talk about this?
Yes.
I mean, it's a massive question, but I think the starting point is remember the mustard seed that becomes this great shelter from which comes this great life. So the Lord is able to bring forth amazing things from a mustard seed. The Lord is still changing lives, and I don't think it's the Lord's will that the church be in decline. And let's face it, even the United States, in all the different countries I've been in, relatively speaking, the United States is one of the most robust local churches in terms of the parish system. So as bad as it is, you guys are, some places it goes from 18 to 35% of Catholics are going to Mass. My diocese is pre-COVID 8.2% go to Mass. In Quebec, it's 4%. In France, it's 4%. It's like, so relatively speaking, the US church is fairly robust. It's strong. Here's the thing: if it's on decline, it's still headed in the wrong direction. And I'm convicted that it doesn't have to be in decline. Here's my conviction is that parish renewal is, you can't reduce it to best practices, because it's not just about do A, B, C, D, and E. In the Divine Renovation model, it's not a description of instructions of things to do. The principle is that, don't copy what we do, understand why we do what we do, and take the why into your context, because then you're living out a principle, and it's these principles that will bring health, and healthy things grow and bear fruit. But it's also very reasonable to have a plan in order to begin to do these things. And many dioceses talk about strategic plans and such. But the real point of parish transformation is transforming the parish culture. There's this old quote attributed to the business guru Peter Drucker, who said, "Culture eats strategy for breakfast." Right? So many of you have heard this. Whether we said it or not is a whole other matter, but it's true. This is what we found out: is that the transformation of parishes is much more difficult than we think, because our efforts are always going to hit this glass ceiling of parish culture. Because in other contexts of the church, like in campus ministry, you've got movement. People aren't camped out for 40 years. People don't go to university for 40 years.
Yep.
You can't say this is the way we've been doing it around here for 40 years. You don't have the same people in leadership for 20 years. You have this normalization of so many things around how we do it and what we presume. And undoing and changing those cultures takes a lot of time and effort. So it's the transformation of culture. But here's the key thing, is that what transforms culture? Leadership, the exercise of leadership. Mm-hmm. And we're a hierarchical church, which means that it's a church led by priests. And so leadership is essential to priesthood. That's primarily in the person of the bishop, shared with the presbyters. And so leaders will shape or transform culture intentionally or unintentionally. And a critical question for us is, are you free to actually exercise leadership? Because right now I'm convinced that the model of ministry or priesthood that many priests are living, our formation as priests, the kind of infrastructure burdens that we're dealing with, they basically tie our hands.
Yeah.
We're handcuffed. And it's killing us. Mm. And in the face of, massive reorganizations and restructurings of dioceses that's happening all over North America and in Europe and many places in the US. And I know in some dioceses you're opening churches because of demographic shift mostly. Mm-hmm. But in many places we need to change the infrastructure. And the question is this: is the infrastructure serving the mission, or is the mission become to try to sustain the infrastructure? And in your attempt to change it, are you enabling the function of leadership or disabling the function of leadership? Because mm-hmm. some of the proposed changes that I've seen in some dioceses, if your priests were dying already, you're just hammering more nails in the coffin.
Mm-hmm. So in this context, then, the idea of pastor for the Catholic culture that prevails right now is really one where we run to our pastors, to our priests, when we have a spiritual problem. Father, tell me how to fix this. The staff won't move or make a decision without Father telling them what to do. The leadership of the parish, yes. Everything basically stops right at the pastor's desk.
Yes.
That's not healthy, because then the pastor, the priest, is the one who has to decide everything, do everything, is the movement maker and everything else. So what's the vision, Father? What are the changes, the practical changes that we need to do? Because that, again, I know this is a series that we could go through.
Yes, this is absolutely enormous. But let me tell a story. So this has been very difficult for me, because I went, St. Benedict, my last experience at Parish, we had 23 staff, 70 ministries, people, I made about 4% of the decisions in any given week in my parish. Now, we had a system of low control, high accountability. It wasn't the Wild West. Everyone was connected into everyone, and ministry leaders were supported. There was a strong accountability system there. So it wasn't chaotic, but it was beautiful. It was wonderful. It was a culture of empowerment. People were authentic leaders who owned their ministries. And, mm-hmm. We had overcome that clericalistic model of Father, as Father, and you mm-hmm. can't do anything without speaking to Father. And I've come into this new parish where there was zero culture of empowerment. Like, people literally won't change a light bulb without asking me. And it's a true story. My first week at this new parish, my associate pastor was on retreat. He was actually on a pilgrimage. And one afternoon, I was by myself. And so I was literally by myself. And a lady knocked on the door, and she said, "Hi, Father James." She said, in the parish hall up the hill, the garbage can is full.
Okay.
Seriously. And she looked at me, and I said, "Yeah." She said, "Well, the garbage can is full." I said, "What do you want me to do about it?" She said, "Well," I said, "this whole office is full of garbage." Like, she said,
"Yeah,
I'll go change it myself." I said, "Thank you." Like, I was shocked to find myself back in this space again. And so I've really struggled to kind of go back and begin again. But this is an enormous question, because some of our priests are wonderful, wonderful priests who have a particular understanding of their ministry as kind of like to be very controlling. And there's two ways for us to exercise leadership, and that is either you can become a bottle opener or a bottleneck. And if we are seeking to control everything, the bottleneck pastor is primarily driven by fear, because this is the unconscious belief. Even though some good things may happen, I've got to control it, because if I don't, ultimately it will be bad.
Yeah.
And that's a bottleneck response. A bottle opener response to leadership will say, even though some bad things may happen, if I open it up, overall amazing things are going to happen for the Lord. People are going to be released into ministry and affirmed in their gifts. And that's exactly what happens, because if you make, the starting point, of course, is evangelization, and people encountering Jesus, being filled with the Holy Spirit, coming to the sacraments, all of that. Because when someone is evangelized, this is the stuff that you teach and preach. When someone comes on fire, it's not like you become a disciple, and then, if you take enough courses, online courses and theology courses, and after 10 years, you might be able to be a missionary disciple. Yeah. No, the Aparecida document put out by the Latin American bishop says that the mission is not a phase that somehow happens to some after discipleship. No, if you're authentically a disciple, you're authentically a missionary disciple.
Amen. Amen.
I remember back when I was 16 years old, when I was forced to go on a stupid religious weekend, after I got into trouble for being involved in teenage extracurricular activity. I encountered Jesus in an incredibly powerful way, a way I didn't know was possible. I knew two things that night as a 16-year-old. I knew that I wanted more of this Jesus, and I wanted my friends to know about it.
Amen.
I didn't know at that time that was a desire for holiness and mission.
Yeah.
I had become a disciple, and I was that night didn't have a clue what I was doing. I was totally unformed. I was useless, but I wanted it. I had a desire for it. And if we are authentically a disciple, then we will be a missionary disciple. And here's the thing. If we create missionary disciples and then don't release people in ministry, then it's almost like having children and giving birth to children and locking them up.
Yeah.
And controlling them. And here we are, we're called father. And yet it's almost like an ecclesial Oedipal complex. If priests are driven by fear in their exercise of their leadership, it's almost like we fear the maturity of the child because somehow we're going to be supplanted. And I think that there's a great irony in that we're called father, and yet so often our parishes can operate like that. So a quick, way to measure if you have this culture in your parish, add up the number of people actually engaged in ministry in your parish. Yeah. What is the proportion compared to your Sunday attendance? Mm-hmm. Often parishes are around 10%, 15%, maybe 20%. Mm-hmm. Well, what does 60% look like? 20% actually is not that great. So, ultimately our task as pastors is to make disciples, form disciples, equip disciples, and empower disciples and send disciples. That's when people are really living as missionary disciples. And it's when that begins to happen in a parish, it's an incredible thing, provided you get the leadership thing right. Like, I think what's important in this model is that when it comes to leadership in a parish, you don't accept volunteers. Leaders don't volunteer. Leaders are called into leadership because you've got to discern it carefully.
Yeah. So, I had a similar experience myself, about 3 years older than you were, went on a retreat, had an amazing encounter with Jesus, was transformed, went back that night, sat on a hill and talked to Jesus with a bunch of guys. And over the next few weeks, went to every single one of my drinking buddies and told them, I met this guy, Jesus, and I can't go out doing the things we were doing before. And I got to tell you, I think what happens, Father, for me, is that a lot of times people separate holiness and mission, when really they're so integral to one another, right? If you want to be a holy saint, if you want to be a saint, you got to be on mission. If you want to be on mission, you got to be a saint. And if you want to be, so the two are one, really. It's the life of a disciple.
Marcel, you're hitting me here in a really sore spot that I've got. And my new book that came out last year has a whole section on the unity of the call to holiness and mission, because I think true holiness, but you just said it, saints, the people we called saints lived a perfect in harmony. These two calls were lived out beautifully. The holiness and mission. They were always missionary. But it seems to me today that somehow the danger is for these two to be separated.
Yeah.
And I find that what we found at St. Benedict Parish, because so much of the parish grew from people who were converted and either came alive in their faith or came into the church from who had stopped going to church or not being raised in the church at all. And so we used Alpha as a tool for evangelization. Then we got people into small groups and home groups and such. But what we saw was that our best missionary disciples were people who were relatively young in their walk, because they knew people who didn't go to church. They knew, and they had freshly discovered this. And so they still had relationships. They were able to connect with people. They had a heart for people. And then what we saw happen, and we saw this ironically sometimes, I remember there were some well-known mission movements in the Catholic Church, without naming any names. And we had some of their missionaries land in our parish as parishioners. They were the least missionary people. They had become so uber Catholic that their growth in holiness had moved way beyond their missionary giftedness, shall we say, or their growth in being missionary. And what happens is when that happens, Catholics become weird and judgmental.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's really weird. So they begin to care more about the cut of a vestment than they do about reaching the lost.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's the weirdest thing. Oh, and they become really, really judgmental.
The navel gazing is really what starts happening.
Oh, man. And same thing, if you separate mission from holiness, then you become an NGO. Yeah. It becomes ideology. So I think the same, but we've seen this even with people who came in from outside of the church. We saw if you didn't actively call people to grow in both at the same time, what happens, there is this inward pull for the church to be self-referential, that the holiness thing will take off, especially when people start getting on social media, Catholic Twitter. Oh man, it's terrible.
Yeah. I
mean, I found it's just shocking how inward focused it becomes. Here's what I see it's like. And I actually heard, I should say who I heard, the what's the evangelical Protestant pastor, Chan?
Francis Chan.
I was going to say Jackie Chan. He was a different guy. Yeah. So Francis Chan, who's a beautiful guy, and he is. I think someday he's, his teaching last year on discovering the ancient belief in the Eucharist was profound.
That's right.
But I heard him say this once, and he was talking about people in his tradition, but we've become like spiritual foodies who go around to these fine dining events and critique to this tiniest detail, the way the food was served and the taste of the food and the presentation. And meanwhile, there's people sitting outside the door starving to death.
Amen.
And all we're doing is like self-absorbed foodies.
Yeah.
And that's what I see happening in a lot of the church. And I see, wow, how does this look like Jesus, who came to seek and to save the lost?
Yeah.
I mean, Jesus wasn't against. I mean, he went to the temple for liturgy. He took part in those things. It's not one or the other, but it seems that we have such a severe imbalance now in the church where I literally heard a priest say once that the mission is holiness. And when that's disconnected, it's problematic. And I think there's a feeling that somehow, see, here's my theory on this. It's not my theory, but Jesus says, as the Father sent me, so I send you. So it's not just about the fact that we ought to go, but the manner of our going. And what was the manner of Jesus going? He took flesh. He pitched his tent amongst us. It's skenosen, right? He crossed over and pitched his tent among the people. He took on flesh.
Yeah.
And I think there's a sense, well, if we do that, if we mix it up with those yucky people out there, we're going to catch spiritual germs. And so we can't do that. And if you do that, if you begin to, in flesh, the gospel somehow in a way people can understand, then surely you're betraying. You've got to be betraying it.
Yeah. 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 It's one of those things where I think a lot of folks have a false understanding of both themselves, their own role as the laity, has a false role of what the laity exists for, priests have a false role, understanding of what they exist for. Because, Father, you're not going to be able to go and evangelize your community. I mean, you're incapable of it, right? I mean, the larger community where you live, that city where you are planting your tent, pitching your tent, you can't reach them all. Neither could Jesus, because he took on flesh and time and space, right? He couldn't go and reach the world that he was called to go and save. So what did he do? He called people together and he said, hey, you go and you go and you go. And yet the church we've become so insular that we hey, let's gather together the people who come to our doors. Let's just throw them open, hope for something, not have a plan for something. And then whoever shows up, we're going to teach them all the doctrines about what it means to be Catholic.
So
this is the way our culture has.
Yes.
And we can't be too overly Protestant in the way we do it. We can't be too overly secular in the way. We have to be very, very stinking Catholic. Get your rosaries out. Let's pray. It's those kind of things that have just held us back. But it all starts really with an understanding of identity. Don't you think?
Yeah. I mean, here's the thing: like, shepherds don't make sheep.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, some may have tried, but sheep make sheep.
Sheep make sheep,
right?
Yeah.
Sheep make sheep, and we've got to form the sheep. It's the whole thing of the predominance of the image of pastor. So we know in the teachings of Jesus, he used the image of shepherd, of sheep, harvest, and fish, catching fish, bringing in the harvest. My role is I'm not the farmer. I wasn't appointed by the bishop as farmer of my parish.
Mm-hmm.
I was appointed the pastor. I wasn't appointed fisherman of my parish.
Mm-hmm.
And so of these three images, that I think you'd be hard pressed to say what was the one that Jesus used the most. He seemed to use all of them fairly often. What's dominated is the pastoring role, which is really about caring for the sheep. And of course, we're divinely mandated to care for the sheep. But this is what my first book I referred to as maintenance. So people sometimes think when I say from maintenance to mission, I mean, oh, you're talking about moving from spending all your time doing administration and maintaining buildings. No, it's not that's a part of maintenance, but maintenance means maintaining the flock. It says in First Peter, maintain the flock that God has appointed to you. So it's a divine mandate where it's not that maintenance is bad and mission is good. No, like maintenance is good. Mm-hmm. Like if you're maintaining your flock, good on you.
Yeah.
Here's the problem: if all you're doing is maintaining the flock, guess what's probably happening? Every year, your flock gets a year older and they get fewer, because the baby sheep, most of them have all left, and so maintaining the flock is not enough. We've got to go on mission. But here's the thing: if your primary identity is to maintain the flock, which comes from the role of being a pastor, even though the good shepherd does leave the 99 in search of the missing one. But if your primary identity as a leader or as a parish is that we've got to care for the people we have, you'll never have enough time to intentionally mobilize for mission. You'll never get there. You'll never do it because there's never enough time. There's never an end to the needs of the sheep. But I think conversely, if you strive to make mission to the least and the lost to be primary, and the church documents all speak about that. The latest Vatican document on parish renewal talked about evangelization, quoting John Paul II from 1981, an address to the Congregation of Clergy, where he spoke about evangelization as primary, preferential, and there's another P word. I always forget what a word, but it was another P word. But that means evangelization is the main thing. That if we make mission primary, most parishes that do that also do an even better job of maintaining the flock. Why? Because instead of it being Father's job to care for everyone, in making missionary disciples, some of those missionary disciples realize that they have pastoring gifts that they have through their baptism. It's not taking over the role of the priest. Who says that the only person who can care for people in the Christian community is the priest? This is part of our problem. It's ridiculous. So part of leadership is to unleash the giftedness of the flock, and the charism of pastoring. The pastoring charism is among the baptized. And so missionary parishes can actually become more caring than parishes that are kind of traditionally modeled.
Mm-hmm.
But I think part of the call for one of the things we do when we work with priests in Divine Renovation Ministry, and right now we've got about 1,800 priests around the world in 75 countries that we're working with. And one of the first things we do with priests and our leadership teams is ask them to look at their model of priestly ministry and how they spend their time.
Mm-hmm.
And you think of the munera of the priest, so prophet, priest, king.
Mm-hmm.
Generally, prophetic ministries are on preaching the word, especially liturgically. It's something only the priest can do. The priestly ministry is celebration of the sacraments, especially the Eucharist, and the kingly. In our tradition, we often spoke about this as governance.
Yeah.
But I would like to really see that understood in terms of leadership, in terms of leading the flock.
Yes.
If you look, these are the main tasks of the priest, and then there's everything else. And we ask priests to map out. And most priests who haven't been intentional about shaping their priestly ministry spend about 65% of their time doing stuff that's not essential to priesthood.
Yeah. Yeah.
And what we do is we work with priests to say, how can we get that 65 down to 20% so that you're putting your best time and energy into the things that only you can do. And that usually means increasing the time put into preaching and vastly increasing the time that you put into leadership.
Mm-hmm.
But we generally haven't valued leadership, and priests weren't trained for leadership. But without investing in leadership, you're not going to see the mobilization of the baptized within your parish.
So another comment and then a question. So my comment is, I've been working with parishes as well. And one of the things I tell people up front is your initial input of what you're going to have to do to start to shape culture is going to be an investment of more time into things. And you're going to be pushing a lot of work. It's going to be difficult. But ultimately, the payoff is down the line in years when you have these people who are enabled, working out of their charisms, missionary disciples who are out there doing things that you shouldn't be doing and taking on the burden,
Exactly.
right? And so it frees you up to be a better priest. It frees you up to be a better pastor. Now, that's my comment. My question is, because you've changed parishes, have you found that you've had to start to apply all this stuff once again?
Oh, yes, absolutely. Way back to the beginning. I joke that I'm doing Divine Renovation for the first time. I'm giving it a try. So far, so good, because, what we learned, what became my first book was really a theological reflection on all of my efforts from my very first parish. It wasn't just about St. Benedict Parish. And even at St. Benedict Parish, we got, in most of the parishes I've been in, I'd say we got through what I would call phase one of parish renewal.
Mm-hmm.
We don't have time to get into this, but phase one is really about getting momentum and culture transformation. It can take 2 to 4 years. And then phase two is when you got to maintain your vision and your culture and begin to put in your major systems for forming and equipping disciples, small groups, sacramental prep, and how that all blends together, etc. That can take 4 to 5 years to do.
Mm-hmm.
And so one thing is that parish renewal takes time. It takes a long, long, long time. And so here I am now, way back at the very, very, very beginning of this process. And I know it's going to take time. And it's and one of the things that we struggle with in many dioceses is the frequency with which pastors are moved. Mm. And so you can never really you're not there long enough to bring about the substantial change that's needed to happen. And we just shoot ourselves in the foot, because we teach any priest with passion in their hearts and a desire to do anything, eventually don't even bother, because whatever you did accomplish through God's grace, the guy who comes in behind you is probably going to let it fall apart or will dismantle it. So the passion begins to die in the heart of a priest. The other thing we teach is that we teach lay people, don't take anyone seriously with any kind of vision they might proclaim, because he'll be gone soon enough and things will just go back to the way they've always been. Mm-hmm. So, so the way we've been doing it has not helped us here. But yeah, I'm back at the very beginning, and it's I'm kind of being intentional about employing these principles, what I've been able to learn in my own experience previously as a pastor and by working with other priests. And it's been quite amazing, because we always say, so often priests who try to go on this journey, they try to do too much. They don't realize how long this actually takes. Yeah. And year one, what have I primarily been doing in year one, other than a few emergency things I had to deal with, and with regard to COVID and such and the amalgamation, is principally vision casting, and building a team.
Mm-hmm.
And starting implementing your evangelistic tools. So for us, we really recommend Alpha. It's not, you could use other tools, but it's casting vision and building a team. That's really your foundational things. Vision is about where are we going? What kind of parish is God calling us to be? Most people don't have a clue. They don't have a clue. Many church-going Catholics are not evangelized, have never been experienced being filled with the Holy Spirit.
Yeah.
Most of our parishes are not filled with missionary disciples, and they can't even relate to that concept. They can't even imagine it.
Yeah.
So at some point, you've also got to let some people will get it. Other people, it's not going to be until they taste and see that they get it.
Mm-hmm.
But it takes time. So year one is vision casting and building a team, getting your key staffing in place, getting people who really support your vision, getting a leadership team that supports the vision, building a pastoral council. That's really what I've been doing in the first year.
So I want to ask you something else, a little bit different, kind of a different direction here, but by way of telling you that I also, you mentioned you go talk to priests. I've done probably a dozen priest convocations the last couple of years. So I don't talk as many times as you do, but one of the things I ask the priests I talk to is, tell me a time when you felt most alive. And inevitably, it's the story of the person who's hadn't been to confession in 30 years. It's when somebody comes up to them after Mass in tears and says, I experienced an indwelling of the Holy Spirit. It's conversion. It's conversion that makes a priest come alive. And what I also echo to them is the same goes for your people. When your people see fruit, your people come alive. But to get a pastor to see that their job is to enable their people to go out into the world and be fruitful and change the world is really what in a sense, their mission is to be the impetus for the church's, the parish's mission. Now, here's where my direction I want to go is, we've seen a lot of fruitfulness in outside of the parish context, right? We see apostolates and movements and orders and others that are very fruitful. And it's almost as if those things are starting to teach the parish, we can do this because the laity can do this. So having examples helps us, but ultimately renewal is going to go through the parish. That's my contention. Would you agree with that, Father James?
Marcel, it's the central conviction of my life. I go back to that, stupid religious weekend where I encountered Jesus. I went back to I didn't know this was possible. I had gone to church my whole life, but I didn't know this was possible. I went back to my parish and I realized most people could not relate to what I was talking about. Yeah. I thought that, and I very quickly realized that I needed others who had the same experience. And so I became involved with the Crucial movement, or the Crucial movement. Many of the listeners are familiar with that. It was present in our diocese. It was very strong in our diocese. And as a 16, 17-year-old, I saw this happening. On Wednesday nights, people came from all over the diocese to gather together in a gymnasium for the most amazing celebration of Mass, for community, for discipleship. There was evangelization. People's lives were transformed. And then I go back to my parish and go to communion. The preaching wasn't good. And I remember thinking back then, why can't that be over? Why should everyone have to leave their parishes and gather together for this experience? Mm-hmm. Why can't this be normal? Here's the thing. In every parish, you've got 5 to 10% of people. There's people like that in every parish. There's pockets of life in every parish, but it's not the norm. There's no culture of it. There's no culture of adult evangelization. There's no culture of authentic Christian community. There's no culture of adult discipleship. Oh yeah, the teens can do that, or the kids can do that. That's good. But you get a bunch of adults to do that, and parishioners, the pillars of the parish start referencing them as the cult, making fun of it, because that's weird. That's weird stuff. Those are the holy rollers. Yeah. And so there's a culture of mediocrity and minimalism in most of our parishes. And that driving question of why can't our parishes be like the movements is the central question in my own life. Is why can't parishes be places where people encounter Jesus, where their lives are transformed, where that encounter is nurtured as people are called on the path to maturity. People are formed by the experience of authentic Christian community. And instead of it just being 5 or 10, 15% of people, why can't it be, become normal?
Yeah.
And so I think I really believe, Marcel, that only churches that make this turn in the future will even exist. A number of years ago, we were talking about our vision statement for Divine Renovation Ministry, and we landed on this, that every Catholic church, every Catholic parish in the world would be missionary. And it sounds really ambitious, but the point is, I think in the next 10 to 20, 30 years, in many places in the world, if your parish is not missionary, if it's simply resting on its laurels of a Christendom model of ministry, it's going to die off. Like the only parishes that are going to exist, like we're now in a new apostolic age. We got to stop acting as if it's the 19th century. We're back into like the 3rd century.
Well, even the things we did 20 years ago are not necessarily going to work today with the rapid change of culture. So with that being said, we're going to have to constantly assess, is this working? Is this not working? We're going to have to put programs into place that are going to, and systems into place where we have accountability, where we have, planning, where we have intention. And you talked about, pastoral placements. I know that there are some dioceses that are moving towards being a little bit more intentional, but then you always have the scandal or the death or whatever else that has to be filled because Father, Monsignor over here had the largest parish in the diocese. We can't just put anybody over there. And so we moved Father from this parish. He was doing such a great job. It's a tough thing. I got to tell you, I pray they don't make you bishop, because that's what they do with good priests, is they punish you by being a good bishop.
I don't think there's any fear of that. I'm a bit too crazy, but it's the thing is too, is like, I don't like, we got to pray for our bishops. Boy, it's like the most awful job I can imagine. It's so painful. Like, it's like, at least in the life of priesthood, we've got these pain points and all the things we have to deal with it's not the reason why we got ordained. Like, I didn't get ordained to be a property manager. And the greatest joy is to see people's lives being transformed. But I see for so many bishops, all they deal with is the complaints and the bad news constantly. They don't get to see the life. And of course, everyone blames them for everything. And so I think we put inhuman expectations upon our priests, and we put insanely inhuman expectations upon our bishops.
Yeah.
It's a terrible, terrible burden to carry. And they're being crushed because we're trying to save the system. And whenever I get to speak to bishops, that's usually my message, is the system's breached. It's like the Titanic. 4 compartments are flooded. It's going down. Oh, this ship can't sink. Yes, it can. And it will. It's the model of diocesan life that we've inherited from a Christendom world. It's breached. It's sinking. It's like, no matter what you do, it's going down. Now, does that mean the church? No, it doesn't mean that the church is bigger than the diocesan parish system. And it's not the diocesan parish system that's sinking. It's the model that's sinking. Yeah. And I think here's the thing. It's like the Lord is pruning us, removing the branches that don't bear fruit. And there's this great, I've got the section of my new book on this, where it's a change theory that I saw a couple of years ago called the Berkana two-loop theory, Birkana, Berkana. And quite simply, it basically says that the cycle of decline and renewal that we're familiar with, it's not a sine curve. It's actually a series of 2 loops. So basically what it means is that, what is God calling us to do? It's not just that God is calling us to renew everything, because that's not how it works. And here's the problem with most strategic plans that dioceses make. The starting presumption, it fails right out of the gate, because the starting presumption is wrong. It's like, okay, everyone, we're all going to do this together. No, you're not. That's never going to happen. What we've got to do is, there's a dying, and there's a new thing being born, while something is being hospiced. It's in palliative care. There's much of our present system that is going to die. Yeah. We're not going to rescue it, but there's something new emerging. Yeah. And as pastoral leaders, you can't just say, we're going to put all of our energy and attention into midwifing this new reality, because that would be irresponsible. At the same time, it's irresponsible to say we've got to put all our time and energy into managing decline.
That's right.
But it's both. We've got to do both. And I say to bishops, look at who are your 15, 16% roughly of pastors who have a passion about missionary renewal and a humility and openness to learn, and come around them and task them to work with teams of people to bring forth this new reality. And who are the pastors who are going to be called to the hospice care of the system, because we're not going to save everything. And it's in the future, as we see these new realities birthed, they will in time, I believe, see the life of the future church as this old system dies. So I think that's part of the challenge right now, but it's very difficult for bishops. And I spoke to a group of US bishops last week when this idea that somehow there's going to be a dying is difficult for them, because I think they have this burden as somehow I've got to save everything. And it's like, it's never going to happen.
Yeah. So, we've only got a few more minutes left. So here's your chance, Father, to have an encouraging word for the leaders who've been listening to our discussion. You get on the elevator with them, it's a 2-minute ride up, and they say, Father, it's just so hard being in a parish right now. What am I supposed to do? How would you encourage them?
Yeah. I would say, first of all, thank you for your ministry, for your labor. Thank you for not letting the fire in your heart go out. Mm-hmm. We've got to have a renewed devotion to the Holy Spirit. There's days in my life where sometimes I'd rather stay home and watch Netflix because I'm so broken and wounded. Like, we need to call out for the fire of Pentecost to relight the flame in our hearts. Number one, and this is a spiritual battle. Like, pastoral conversion is conversion. Conversion is always a spiritual reality. Get people praying for you. Next, get a team of people around you. Stop trying to do this alone. No one has, I don't care how gifted you are, no one has all the gifts. No one has. And learn about, the writings of Pat Lencioni and Marcel. You work with people on leadership teams, and we do that at our ministry. Get help to form a team. Get in touch with what makes you passionate, and begin to dream, overcome IDD, imagination deficit disorder. Begin to dream again, and let that dream fire up your heart. Yeah. And then here's the thing, here's a critical thing. What are you going to stop doing? Yeah. Because parish renewal is hard work. It's a marathon. It's not a sprint. And in the Catholic world, we just keep adding. If what you're doing is not sustainable, you're not going to get anywhere. So what are you going to stop doing? This is one of the blessings of COVID. Yeah. Good grief. One of the blessings is that there's a whole bunch of stuff we ain't starting up again. No. And so what are you going to stop doing? Because you've got to get healthy. If you're not physically, spiritually, emotionally healthy, it's not going to last. Yeah. It's great resources. Find the resources you need. Marcel, your ministry has great material. Divine Renovation, we've just made the shift from being charging fees to not charging fees, because we're donor funded. So we've got resources. If that helped you, there's a lot of organizations around who, if you've got the willingness and the humility to learn, there's groups, ministries ready to help you. So there is help to be had. And finally, it's possible. It truly is possible. I think that's what we need. We need to believe and know that it's truly possible. And do evangelization. Get like I'll tell you this one thing, then I'll shut up. Like, I'm back at an Alpha. We started Alpha. So we did Alpha with parishioners. We said, this is not Alpha, this is Alpha Taster. Because real Alpha is when you call people from outside back in. People say Alpha is a terrible tool for Catholic catechesis. I agree. It should never be used for adult Catholic catechesis. It's not a tool for Catholic catechesis. It's an evangelistic tool for people outside the church. Amen. And then you use other tools to follow up. But I'm back in an Alpha small group, real Alpha. In my small group, there are 2 unbaptized men, 2 fallen away Catholics who are open and questioning. There's a young woman who's a Christian but not Catholic, and it's the most amazing conversation. So actually do evangelization wherever you do it. Get in a room with people who are not Catholic, not baptized, who are asking questions, and remember what it's like. Like, don't just talk about being missionary. Actually do it, and help your people to do it, and then see it, because then we're really going to be taste and see.
Amen. Father, if somebody wants more information about Divine Renovation or your books, where do they go to find that stuff?
Just Google Divine Renovation, divinerenovation.org. Okay. Has all the information there.
Well, we sure appreciate your time, Father. I know it's precious, and we'll keep you in our prayers.
Thanks, Marcel. Appreciate it, and God bless everyone. Take care.